So, okay, Brandy.
Welcome, welcome. Our next trailblazer is coming from the core of what AI showbiz is all about, being here for so many years. His talk today is The Intelligence of the Digital Twin, Harnessing the Genius of the Group Mind for NFTs. Brett Leonard is a director, writer, producer, and co founder of Studio Lightship and Virtual Psychedelics. The futurist and film director of sci fi thrillers himself, The Lawnmower Man and Virtuosity, shares his amazing work in NFT arena for future predictions. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Good to be here once again. As Molly was just saying, I've attended all of these and spoke at all of the AI Showbiz Summit events. They were physical events initially. Now they've been virtual for the past few. And I was saying, what I'm going to talk about today is really an extension of what my talks have been at the Showbiz Summit for these last number of years, because really I come to this from the standpoint of being a storyteller, and for me, one of the critical aspects of us really looking at what's happening from the standpoint of this birthing of the digital twin of the virtual world that's happening, and then the value equation that's brought into that virtual world, something I've been talking about for 30 years with friends like Dan Mapes, who's here and speaking today as well. It really is about us setting a context for people to reset their understanding of what value is, of what abundance is. And that's something that, when we jump into these new technologies and suddenly NFTs are that's the buzzword that everyone's excited about, because there's a tremendous amount of amazing activity going on around that. It's easy to miss what it really means from a mythopoetic standpoint, what it really means from the standpoint of us looking at what is the value of human beings and their activity and their engagement with each other, both creatively and in the imaginative realm. First of all, I just finished a film called Triumph, which is in the theaters as of this last week. It has a wide theatrical release in America. It's an inspirational sports story, and the way it connects to NFTs is my brother, Greg Leonard, who did the score for the film. He is the first person to put a full film score onto the blockchain for NFTs. And the reason he was able to do this, apropos of the talk that just happened, is because of the new sort of model of the way films are starting to be happen, and the value of it being fractionalized. The film was a very cost-effective movie, let's put it that way, and so he wasn't paid a lot to do the score, but he did a full theatrical, orchestral score, and so he was able to retain the rights to that score, which is something I think needs to happen more and more and more with the individual artists that come together to make a movie. And because of that, he was able to then, because he owns the rights to that score, he was able to put it on the blockchain and validate it in terms of NFTs, and is the first one to ever do that. The film is about a young man who has cerebral palsy, who wants to wrestle in high school in the 1980s. The man who wrote the film, Michael Coffey, actually has cerebral palsy, and the actor who plays him, R.J. Mitty from Breaking Bad fame, he also has cerebral palsy. So this has been a film connected to a lot of charities, including the United Cerebral Palsy Foundation. We've had all these charity screenings, and some of the money from the NFT aspect of the score and any other aspects of the NFTs that are connected to this film are going to go to those charities. So it's a really unique, sort of test case of exactly the kind of things we're talking about here, and how, the intelligence of doing the fractionalized value between of all the different artists that come together on a feature film. And here's a feature film that's actually getting a theatrical release, which is very rare these days. It actually has a 45-day window where it's only going to be in theaters. I encourage everyone to go see it. If you want to go see an inspirational story that makes you feel good, go see Triumph in Cinemark theaters across the country. And also check out my brother's score for the film on a blockchain and in the NFT market. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about apart from that is the idea that, you know, as we are birthing this digital twin, the virtual world, and we are now starting to give value to those things, there's a lot of counter dynamic talk going on. I don't know how many of you watch Bill Maher, but Bill Maher just his last Friday did an entire segment where he just bashed the blockchain, cryptocurrency, NFTs from a very, very old school capitalistic perspective. And, you know, look, I like Bill. I agree with him on a lot of things, but it's a perfect example of someone completely missing the larger context of what's happening here. The fact that the perception of value has always been something that's ephemeral, has always been something that we create as human beings between each other in our interactions. And so NFTs are now a way of codifying that in the virtual world in a way that brings value just for being imaginative. The idea that imagination itself is something that can have tremendous value just by being alive and having an imagination and experiencing the creative world and being able to express your own creative world within the context of the virtual world connected to the real world. That's where the NFT is sitting at the junction of those concepts. So what I think is really important, and this is going back to, you know, the idea of how does AI, relate to this, the way in which these worlds are managed, the way in which we manage the value in these worlds, AI is going to be a tremendous part of this. And we need to tell stories that set the context of AI as a positive thing, not a negative dystopian thing. Because we have, as humans, told a lot of dystopian stories. And you know what? They served their purpose. They served a purpose to warn us on things. As a matter of fact, the films that I told about virtual reality that helped popularize the idea of virtual reality were actually cautionary tales. So that's the irony. Beware of telling cautionary tales because you often popularize the very thing you're warning about. At the same time, I'm tremendously enthusiastic about the virtual world and its positive abilities. And so the idea that we're creating value in a virtual world that, you know, as Bill Maher said, there's nothing there, it's actually not real. That's not true because human imagination is real. What we create as humans in engaging with each other is just as real as anything we pull out of the ground. And now we have to stop pulling things out of the ground because the planet needs us to stop that. So the fact that we're shifting as the human story into creating value in the virtual world, we need to tell those stories. We need to tell the story that that is a positive thing. And we need to also activate the idea of artificial intelligence, which by the way, I hate the term artificial intelligence. I think it's augmented intelligence or even extended intelligence because it's not artificial, it's coming from us. It's coming from our unique abilities and creation with technology and our own imaginations. We need to imbue the AI that is going to be managing all this value, all of this interactivity and this engagement within the virtual world with the better angels of our nature, not the reptilian brainstem theater that we've often experienced with, you know, many media forms like social media. Look what's happened over the past number of years with the nature of American democracy. All of these things are because we've been telling the wrong stories. We need to now shift into utopian storytelling. Doesn't mean that there's not conflict and drama and things that are, you know, incredibly challenging within the context of that, because stories always will have their challenges. There always will be villains. There always will be protagonists. But at the same time, there's a way of the overarching meta narrative can be something that's very positive. And part of that is creating the overarching meta narrative that value in the virtual world connected to the real world is something that is being created anew, that is not just connected to the old stories of Western capitalism or of totalitarian communist capitalism, all of the different forms that exist that have a kind of brutal zero-sum game at the core of their stories. The idea that someone must lose in order for us to win. That idea at the core of human interaction with business and currency and money and value is the story we need to shift and morph into something greater, because the moment is happening because of the invention of the blockchain, which is the most significant invention since the printing press. I believe, Dan Mapes and I were talking about this just recently, because it allows this ability for there to be smart contracts and the ability for value to be measured in a way that doesn't involve the corruption of the middlemen. So one of the things about this new story that we're telling that's very, very disruptive and a bit confronting for a lot of people, including people like Bill Maher, is that we're eliminating a lot of that middleman. Now, let me talk about my own career in Hollywood. I've been doing films in Hollywood for over 30 years. And I will tell you, I have over $500 million of box office. At some point, I thought, let's follow the money. Let's find out what's going on here. And the level of corruption and the amount that the creators of creative work in the Hollywood model are not rewarded is significant. Not just myself, but everyone. And so the moment now that NFTs are coming into that kind of creative endeavor, epitomized by what my brother just did with his score, is an absolute revolution of the model for creative work that goes out on a global basis. And that aspect, again, we need to not be so reactive to it and thinking, well, how are these people doing this? They're just making value where there is none, which is kind of the counter story that's out there. And even people that are as, progressive as Bill Maher are telling that story. We need to tell the other story. We need to show that this is something that can actually lead, and this is where we kind of bring in the metaphysical or the spiritual. I really believe we bring in the concept of universal abundance. Because universal abundance is something that I believe is the right of every human being. We are at the moment where we're kind of activating this idea of the global human, right? And this is an idea that was given to me by an interaction I had many, many years ago with Joseph Campbell. I asked him, what is the mythology I need to follow as a creative artist? I had done nothing at this point. I was 20 years old. And he said, it's the mythology of the global human, of the interactivity between all of us as humans on this planet. And we have to acknowledge that value can be given to everyone just for being alive. And that idea, which goes against the Calvinist Puritan aspects that founded our country, is actually one of the most radical things you could say. The idea that everyone has the right to universal abundance, based around the idea that now we're creating this other virtual world where value is going to have, a multiple of what the value in the actual real, total addressable market of the planet is. $80 trillion is the total addressable market supposedly. And in the new digital world, there's going to be possibly $800 trillion of market and of value. And that means that everyone can actually participate in abundance, can live a wealthy lifestyle, for lack of a better term. These are old concepts and old tropes and old words that come from this old model. For me, the thing that's the most challenging is, as a storyteller, how do we tell the stories that activate these aspects of universal abundance, that activate the aspects of the better angels of our nature, that actually embed those aspects into the augmented intelligence that's going to be managing these things? Because no one human or even group of humans can manage what is about to appear here. So we need to have those aspects of our better aspects embedded within the context of how that AI works. And that, to me, is one of the things that's almost a blind spot. It's something that many people don't actually look at. Like, we need to set the context. The technology rushes in so quickly, and people, especially that aren't part of the world we're part of, they have no concept of what's going on. They need to be able to have a context. And the best way to set context is with story. Because story is the thing that allows people to have a thing within the racial unconscious that embeds the idea of possibility. And the possibilities that are there with NFTs, with the value equation of the digital twin that's erupting, with the abilities that are going to be enabled by the spatial computing foundation that Dan and his company Versus is creating. These are extremely radical, disruptive, and revolutionary concepts that I believe can actually come in a simple, peaceful way. But the thing that will create that context of it coming in a simple, peaceful way is the stories we tell. As storytellers, as creators, that's the thing that will actually set how much attrition will be part of this. There's always going to be attrition in the context of human activity. There's going to be things that are, negative that come off of some of these aspects. There's a lot of Wild West stuff going on in the NFT world right now, which allows the naysayers to look at it and say, hey, this is something that, there's a lot of crookery going on. But the truth is, when it's actually fully embedded within the digital twin and managed by the AI on the blockchain, that crookery will go away. And especially if we actually create the stories that show people that can happen, that show people that is the new world that we're creating, that there is a utopian story to tell here. And it takes a lot of courage to tell a utopian story. It's a lot easier to tell dystopian stories. I've done it. It's you get a lot of reaction, a lot of a strum and drang happens when you do that. But to tell a utopian story and actually have people really believe it and really acknowledge that there's that possibility, that's the thing we have to have, as I believe we need to meet as a challenge. Those of us that are part of this initial birthing that's happening right now. That's sort of the main thing I wanted to talk about. I know that there's the ability to have some questions and whatever. I'd love to interact with anybody about any of these concepts.
I love it, and I think there are great questions coming on here. So they wanted to know. Yes. So when it comes to your, excuse me, when it comes to your film. Yes. You look like you're my age, so you probably remember the Criterion Collection.
Of course, I am a subscriber of the Criterion channel to this day. It's
perfect. Okay, so
it's a great channel, by the way, to check out world cinema. If you need to watch all the works of Ingmar Bergman, they're there. And by the way, everyone should.
Awesome. So one of the things that I counsel a lot of filmmakers on when they're trying to figure out what to NFT, aside from, clips and trailers, and I love that they did the soundtrack, Big Brother did the soundtrack. Yes. One of my favorite things to suggest is, post the film out and it's out, on Netflix or whatever, to use the NFT as a gated content access key, and then put up the film in a locked manner with a director's commentary.
Yes. Yeah. Look, there's so many incredible creative ways to do this. And, the challenge, of course, is that there are producers, there are financiers, there are rights issues. There are all these things that you have to deal with in order to get those things together. Now, one thing that happened here, because my brother put his score on the blockchain, and he had the exact right to do it because they only paid him enough to get the rights to license the score for the film because they wanted it cheap, right? They wanted it cheap. So guess what? He gets to now own what's happening and own what's on the blockchain. And that is a major, major, moment of inflection that's going on right now. I believe the new model for all of these creative activities will be the fractionalization of the different value here, that people will have the value of their own creative work, acknowledged in a different way than the model that is connected to the boilerplate of Hollywood. Because those of us that have been through that, and I've been through it for over 30 years, know that it basically works on the tenets of organized crime. I mean, that's just the reality. Right?
Yes.
I'm old enough and I got gray hair enough in my beard to say that because it's absolutely true. Now, they get away with it. Absolutely. because the way in which the boilerplate is created by the entertainment lawyers and all of the agents. It's a paradigm. It's a metaphor and a paradigm that we need to shift. And NFTs allow us to shift it. So those of you that are part of the new generation of filmmakers, do not accept the boilerplate. Do not accept that this is the way it has to happen, because the world is changing. It doesn't have to happen that way. And your value can actually be acknowledged, and you can get the rewards of that value in a completely different way now.
Absolutely. That's what I was saying earlier when I was talking to Janicki. Is I have all of my contracts. Now, I can't actually find all of those people from 23 years ago,
right?
But I can create trust wallets for them. Yes. And all of their royalties just go in there and sit there until we find them, or we find an heir. Because some of them
I'm going to be putting a lot of NFTs out related to the Lawnmower Man, because there's all this material and concept designs and all that, and I'm doing exactly that same, because finding everybody 30 years later, not so easy. But there's ways of doing that in the context of, and here's the great thing, because it's on the blockchain, nobody can go in and create and mutate that. It can actually be something that's there. When you create that trust wall, it's there. It's a, what they call a trustless network, meaning you don't need trust, because the blockchain, the intelligence of that blockchain is what actually creates the ability for us to have these new contractual agreements between human beings. And that is really radical, especially in the context of the Hollywood film business, because of just the nature of how commerce and art have always clashed and been a kind of war. It definitely has been for all of my career. And I've been a warrior in that. I've been able to survive that. The truth is, not everyone's built that way. And now I believe there's going to be an opening for, for lack of a better term, more sensitive creative artists that don't have the general aspect that I have, where no one's going to screw with me if I go in there and make a stand. But you can be a truly sensitive artist that actually gets that value back. You don't have to necessarily have the warrior armor on like I have had to my whole career.
So what you're saying is they don't have to go to Sun Tzu school before they walk into an agency meeting?
I mean, I will say Sun Tzu is a good thing to study no matter what you're doing. But yes, I think that there's a moment now that's happening where true creativity and imagination will be given its due, as opposed to the business side, the middlemen that have always taken the value in businesses like Hollywood business. I mean, it's not just Hollywood that happens in, of course, it's a lot of other business models. And again, it's that the story of the zero-sum game. I've got to win, so you lose, so that's how I gain. That story has to be changed. And now we have the technology foundation to change it.
I love it. And you froze, or I froze. One of us froze. But this was brilliant. I love all of the anecdotes. And for those in the audience, if you are a creative person in filmmaking or music or any of the other arts, now I think we figured out you can pretty much do a TV show from home, because all the big boys late night did that. You can pretty much make an album from home, because my girl just got 3 million plays on an album she did in her walk-in closet. So, the days of having to ask for permission are over. And now with the NFTs, the financing for your dreams is actually at your fingertips.
The gatekeepers are dissolving.
Yeah.
And the modalities of value contracts are dissolving. And it couldn't happen at a better time.
I want to go ahead and jump in. I'm such a fan, Brett, of your work and all that you're doing. I can't thank you enough for zooming in right in the middle of your film launch. That was absolutely fascinating. You opened our eyes and ears and our hearts into a whole new world of NFTs and all the great things we can do with them. I just can't thank you enough, Brett.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Molly, and thank you so much for your support and giving me a forum to talk about these ideas. And I've always been able to talk about the ideas without any holds barred.
Yes.
the AI Showbiz Summit. So, you know, that's it holds a very special place in my heart because of that. So, and again, everybody go out and watch Triumph on the
Triumph, yes.
so much better on the big screen.
Yes, we can go back to the big screen and the whole experience of being with others watching film. Brett, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. We have another amazing trailblazer up in just a moment.
Yeah.
I'm going to invite my colleague from Portal Hologram, Ryan, to do his test, though, because Tim Draper is coming up in a half an hour and we're doing something unusual. So let me get him testing. We're ready for the test. I'm multitasking Molly today, and if my colleague with Portal Hologram, go ahead, we're going to do a test. And by the way, Brett, we are live on YouTube. People are watching on YouTube your talk, and people will be watching it for many years to come.
Right.
And again, thank you so much. So my colleague, I see him, he's out the window. I'm here in the Portal Los Angeles studio because we're going to be presenting at noon someone through the Portal holoportation device. And we're going to use the next 5 minutes to do a little computer test with all of us here. But Brandy, wasn't Brett's talk amazing?
Powerfully, I've written down so many quotes. They need to be into